So before going to the examples, some background information that is relevant to your considerations. In 2005, the UK released regulations for the control of vibration at work, requiring employers to manage the risk for their employees. Despite the regulations being in place now for some 15 years, there continues to be just under 1,000 cases of reportable incidents of hand-arm vibration syndrome on an annual basis. So why might it be that the regulation has not been effective in eliminating this problem? One area of concern is that the vibration magnitude information that's used for people to assess the potential risk to their employees may not actually be appropriate in terms of assessing the risk that they are carrying out in their daily work. In other ways, the approach to risk assessments could be inappropriate in terms of how they reflect the future work of individuals, and if they do not reflect the work of the individuals, then it becomes more difficult to put in place controls which are adequate or effective in managing their risk. One of the major variables in hand-arm vibration exposure risk is how competent an operator is at carrying out the work that they are being asked to do. And being able to assess an operator's competency in the use of power tools may be something that is difficult for someone to establish. It is probably well understood that tool selection, the condition of the tools and the condition of the consumables used for that tool need to be appropriate in order to minimise hand-arm exposure risk. But that is often done without a knowledge of knowing for sure that the right tool is being used and that the condition of the tool as you would expect. So again, uncertainties that may well be known to be an influence, but uncertainties that are not necessarily, without technology, able to be quantified. Another key feature of how ReactTech look on the management of hand-arm vibration exposure is the need to leverage the data that can be gathered. The use of metrics, KPIs, the use of data to inform decisions is something that has been coming to everyday thinking for the last decade or so. Data can inform better decisions, and it is within this seminar the intent to show you just how that data can be used effectively in the pursuit of managing hand-arm vibration exposure. So for this next piece, we'll explain a situation where ReactTech were involved in doing a detailed study of a repetitive task. So a duty holder, a leading utilities company, wanted to carry a study in a manner where they could define very clearly the risk involved in what seems like quite a simple task, the excavating of a hole in a hard surface. So to carry out the assessment in an engineered, detailed manner, we controlled the size of area to be excavated. The tool to be used was controlled, and it was the same tool that was being used by all the operators. And then the exercise was measured using multiple technologies. So timer watches were used, ReactTech's HAVwear was used, and scientific measurement equipment, a Larson Davis vibration measurement monitor, vibration measurement instrument was used as well to gather as much detail as possible. So around 14 different operators were used in the exercise. In carrying out the exercise a number of times over, it was established that using the typical time to dig the hole, using the average vibration magnitude to dig the hole, that essentially in total it should take about 280 HSE points to excavate the hole, and therefore if the work could be shared with 2 people, the risk for the task should be about 139 points. and if 3 men could be assigned to the work, then the risk would be below the action value, below 100 points. It should also be noted that during the testing, the duty holder was using a tool where the manufacturer declared its vibration magnitude to be 4.2 meters per second squared. The duty holder, through other testing, had established a figure of 12. During the exercise, the measurement established using the Larson-Davis reference instrument was 10.5 as an average over all of the measurements, and the HAVwear device established a value of 11.8, so an order of magnitude similar to the duty holder's assessment and the Larson-Davis measurements taken during the exercise, but significantly greater than the manufacturer's declared value. So as a work study exercise, it was quite comprehensive in establishing the expected risk for this exercise for any employees deployed doing it in a future basis. However, when you also look at the exercise on a personal basis, and you look at all of the individuals who were involved in the exercise, and the people involved in the exercise were controlled by the typical sort of approach to task sharing. They were asked to share the work within their teams. So as a reminder, the two teams may have involved 2 or 3 people. Actually, on one occasion there were 4 people involved. But at all times, the work was asked to be averaged or to be shared amongst the individuals. When we look across the series of excavations for the exercise, and we look at all of the individuals, and for all of the holes that they were involved with, what was their maximum exposure for any one hole. And the range of vibration exposures, when you look at it in an individual level, far exceeded the expectation of ourselves or of the duty holder. So there were individuals who were down close to 50 exposure points, while there was one particular individual who almost reached the exposure limit value in his excavation. In checking the records, he did share the work that he participated in that excavation. He did more of the work than his colleague in doing the excavation, but also he received a particularly high vibration magnitude during his work. And what was seen in the video evidence of the activity was that his technique was such that he was essentially transmitting less energy into the hole, into the surface, and more energy into himself, as a consequence, increasing his risk, but also taking longer in the excavation activity because there was less energy being transited into the surface as would be desired. So embedded within all of that exercise was a realization that any particular tool will have a range of vibration magnitude. Now, this was also reported by the HSE laboratories, and some of this information is now relayed within L140 guidance. But the HSE laboratories did an exercise whereby they took 3 different tool types and used those tools for a variety of works, and during these different activities measured the vibration magnitude emitted by the tool. And for all of the tools, there was a distinct range of vibration magnitudes possible from that tool, depending on exactly what that tool was being used for. Now, within this exercise, what the HSE also have shown in their graphic is on the left-hand side, there's a little red mark, meaning the declared emission for that particular tool from the manufacturer. And on the right-hand side, there's the mean of all the tests. So what can be seen from this graphic is that in the case of the impact drill, the declared emission value is perhaps usable in for the purpose of a risk assessment of vibration exposure, but in the case of the other 2, it's most certainly not. So the HSE do strongly advise that it is really important when looking at the declared vibration magnitude for any tool, that the work is done to check how that measurement was taken and if that measurement condition reflects your future use of the tool. Indeed, for any source of vibration magnitude, it's important to understand in establishing that data, how was the measurement taken, what were the tool use conditions, and do those tool use conditions reflect your intended use of the tool? And only if it does, would it then be suitable for use in a risk assessment of exposure to hand-arm vibration. In the L140 guidance from the HSE, they have now expanded from that concept with the graphics to give more detailed information for a list of approximately 30 different tools from different industry types, 6 of which are reproduced here just as an example. So for each tool, they will give a range of vibration values as they have been able to determine from field use of these tools. And they do within the guidance within this Appendix 3 of L140, they would suggest what they would expect a number to be used for a risk assessment. And they use a number which is towards the higher end of that range at the 75th percentile of all the data that they've taken. A few examples here that you might find interesting. Plate compactors, particularly dramatically wide range of vibration magnitudes possible. What that's very much dependent on is whether or not there's been vibration reduction techniques deployed by the tool manufacturer. So for the best tools in this product category where there are vibration reduction mechanisms within the tool, you can see as low as 4 meters per second squared, whereas a typical number where there isn't vibration reduction mechanisms is more like 18 meters per second squared. Another one that you might find interesting here is they do include a stone hammer. A lot of people look on exposure to hand-arm vibration as being something that's solely related to the use of powered tools. But stonemasons in the use of manual tools can be exposed to particularly high levels of vibration magnitude, as indicated here, of between 7 and 22 meters per second squared. And it also should be noted that when using a chisel with such stone hammers, if the chisel is not protected with some sort of vibration reduction sleeving, then the vibration magnitude in the chisel hand will be even higher than that in the hand holding the hammer. So I'll move on now to start to talk about Reactech's technology. So the Reactech HAVwear product, which has been on the market since 2016, is quite unique in that it is able to carry out 2 assessments of exposure to vibration at the same time while any tool is being used. So while the tool is being used, there will be a determination of exposure in the HSE exposure points using the trigger time as established by the presence of vibration, and then using a predetermined, or you might consider an expected vibration magnitude for that tool, and that is information that is recorded within a tool tag attached to the tool. So combining that predetermined vibration magnitude with trigger time gives what Reactech would refer to as TEP points, simply meaning it's the exposure points as calculated by using the tool expected vibration magnitude. And if your tool vibration magnitude is in compliance with HSE guidance, i.e. it should be representative, then your exposure points assessment is in compliance with HSE guidance and certainly compliant to regulations again, providing the vibration magnitude is probably the vibration magnitude experienced by the tool use. So in addition to giving you that assessment of risk, what the HAVwear product is able to do is to give you an assessment of exposure based on a real-time vibration magnitude. By real-time vibration magnitude, what we mean is the HAVwear has triaxial accelerometers in the device that is essentially held on your wrist. And Reactech have developed algorithms which essentially correct for the transmissibility through the hand to the wrist. So by reversing that transmissibility through the hand, then what we are able to give you is a real-time approximation of the vibration magnitude going into the hand at the time of using the tool. So what we would say is this is a very good approximation of the real-time use of the tool. How good that approximation is will be demonstrated in further on slides. So basically this real-time vibration magnitude together with the same trigger time is used to calculate what Reactech refer to as the sensed exposure data, or SEP. So the SEP is an indication of real use exposure. Our intention by giving you both sets of data is really to give you the power of seeing where things are different from what you expect. And if it's different from what you expect, that generally means there's a problem that can be solved and therefore a risk that can be reduced. So before going on to explain how well the real-time assessment of HAVwear is in terms of giving you a vibration magnitude, which is probably that experience during tool use, a little bit of information on how the ISO standards would require that vibration magnitude is measured on a tool. So a vibration standard ISO 8041 exists to enable a consistent approach to a precise measurement of a tool's vibration magnitude. It requires that the measurement is taken on each of three axes. It requires that those three axes of measurement are combined in a certain way to give a single value, and requires that a frequency weighting curve is applied to that measurement, essentially to ensure that the vibration signals which are most dangerous are the ones which are most influential on the reading, and all of that is laid out in the standard. Now, to do that in compliance with the standard requires that the accelerometers are firmly attached to the grip point of the tool. It requires some detailed requirements of the instrument. That means that they should be calibrated, and generally requires an experienced technician in order to take those readings and to ensure that the readings are correct. The two graphs shown here illustrate the results from a wide range of tool testing carried out by Reactech to demonstrate the way in which the HAVwear sensed data is able to correlate with a measurement taken on the tool in compliance to the standards, where both the measurement of the HAVwear and the measurement with the reference instrument, which is compliant to the standard, are taken at exactly the same time. So for each tool, at least 3 tests were carried out, typically of 1 minute duration, and at least 2 people were using the tool to give an average of the people and an average of tests for that tool. If the tools were used for different purposes, those test results are separated, and you can see some tool information, such as this general purpose battery powered drill, being used multiple times. So the HAVwear data is shown in blue, the reference instrument data in green, and where possible on the chart, also the manufacturer's declared data has been included. So for instance, in the case of general purpose battery powered tool, the purple line is constant because the manufacturer declares one value, where you could see through the varied use of the tool, both the reference instrument real use data and the HAVwear real use data changing to follow the vibration energy that differs depending on the use of the tool. And I think in all of this data, you would see and recognize a very strong correlation between the Reactech data from the HAVwear and the reference instrument. There are a few occasions when they don't match, such as this hobby sander. It's an electric power sander. But in the most part, through this large cohort of differing tools, through a wide range of vibration magnitudes, you can see a very strong correlation between the ReactTech data and the reference instrument. By contrast, the manufacturer's data appears quite random as to whether it does match, which it matches on the case of the odd tool, and where it doesn't, where it can be both significantly higher and also significantly lower. Following logging into the ReactTech analytics, the opening view is what we call the dashboard. And the dashboard is intended to give you an overview of performance over a particular period of time. So in this motor vehicle repair environment, we're looking at a data set where the product was used, and that's the timeline that it was filtered for. The pie chart gives you an immediate impression of whether the risk as assessed by the tag exposure versus the real use sensed exposure is of a similar level. And this chart would indicate that the sensed vibration is assessing a risk to be somewhat higher than that from the tag values. In this particular example, the duty holder split their data set between employees employed within a body shop environment versus those within a workshop environment to allow him to assess the risk between the two. And in the league table at the bottom of the dashboard, you can see the performance of the two groups side by side. So essentially what we're seeing here in terms of overall workforce average, for the body shop environment, the risk, according to the tag values used by the duty holder, is about 40 points per day, and that's similar to the workshop. Whereas the sensed vibration value would suggest that the body shop had a materially higher risk than the duty holder expects, but also materially higher risk than the workshop. And if you look at it in terms of the highest individual levels, you can see that there's a very large gap or a difference between the highest risk individual and the overall group, which again sort of reflects the sort of information that we're seeing in the utilities example that we showed at the very beginning of this seminar, where one individual materially exceeded the risk of all his colleagues. Again, the data suggests that this is happening in the real environment of this particular company. And again, by the highest risk individual, you would see very much that the body shop is a higher risk environment, and that is reflected in the HSE statistics on ridders.